Welcome to today's explainer. Okay, let's be real for a second. We've all seen them, right? Those incredibly broad, massively ambitious, highly impressive sounding PhD titles. They sound absolutely amazing at dinner parties, but honestly, they are so often a one-way ticket straight to burnout. Choosing a topic that sounds world-changing but lacks a practical foundation is literally the biggest trap new researchers fall into. So today, we're walking through the PhD Survival Guide, reality checks for your research proposal, and we're going to make sure you don't fall into that trap. I'm giving you a pragmatic step-by-step framework today. We're going to snap out of the daydreaming phase and help you carve out a highly achievable, realistic project.
Here's what we're covering in today's explainer. First up, the PhD reality check. Second, time and institutional constraints. Third, defining your course scope. Fourth, auditing your technical readiness. And finally, number 5, the best PhD is finished.
All right, let's dive right into Section 1, the PhD reality check, or as I like to think of it, escaping the broad proposal trap. So the absolute first hurdle you've got to clear is recognizing that a PhD is a race against a clock. Scientific validity and institutional feasibility, they must always take priority over a flashy title simply because time is your ultimate unchangeable constraint. Usually you only have about 3 years to get this whole thing done. And if you're a full-time working scholar, trying to balance a demanding day job with your research, that time is compressed even further. You literally cannot pause the clock, so your proposal has to respect it from day one. Moving on to Section 2, time and institutional constraints. These are the hard limits of doctoral research. Let's take a brutally honest look at the absolute physical and temporal boundaries that dictate what's actually possible for your research. This pretty daunting 3-year timeline usually starts with institutional approvals, which, let's face it, always take way longer than you think. Then comes sample collection. That's followed by intensive lab work, things like cultures, antimicrobial susceptibility testing, and diagnostic tests like PCRs. After all that, you've got bioinformatics analysis, and finally, thesis writing. The immense pressure here reveals a very strict 1-year remaining rule for second-year students. Basically, if you're entering year 2, you have to ensure that the work you're proposing can realistically be completed in the literal months you have left. And that brings us to the institutional reality check. Time for a little bit of tough love. Do you actually have guaranteed access to the specific samples you need? We're talking pus, synovial fluid, or bone samples. Do you have explicit cross-departmental support, say between orthopedics and microbiology, to actually get clinical details and patient antibiotic histories? And what about your equipment? Let's do an audit. Do you have a functioning PCR machine, gel documentation systems, proper isolate storage, and crucially, an actual budget for reagents and primers? If the answer is no, well, your proposal needs a reality check today. Section 3, defining your course scope. This is where we talk about surgical focus. This is where we introduce an incredibly vital concept, the minimum achievable PhD. You see, scope creep is the ultimate enemy of graduation, so we really need to get precise. You might have this grand, broad expectation, like studying general orthopedic pathogens. But a realistic approved reality is highly specific, something like focusing solely on specific prosthetic joint infections or osteomyelitis. That broad proposal, it's doomed because it's completely untethered. The surgically focused one, on the other hand, gives you a realistic, bounded scope. It tells you exactly what a practical project looks like. So how do we actually lock in that surgical focus? Step 1, identify the simplest version you can definitely complete. That is your non-negotiable core. Step 2, keep advanced frontiers optional unless guaranteed support exists. You have to aggressively separate the absolutely essential core of your project from the exciting but highly dangerous optional extras. Basically, if it's not essential for graduation, it is an optional frontier.
Section 4, auditing your technical readiness. It is time for an honest self-assessment.
We're shifting the focus inward now. To prevent massive delays in your timeline, you really have to ask yourself a tough question. What techniques can you actually perform independently? There's a massive difference between just knowing about a technique conceptually and being able to walk into the lab and independently execute a DNA extraction or an antimicrobial test without a supervisor holding your hand. You must be brutally honest right now about what requires training versus what requires external outsourcing.
And this especially applies to advanced computational skills. We're talking about highly specialized tools like AlphaFold for protein structure, Mega for phylogeny, PyMol, R, or Python. Now, these are incredible, powerful tools for sure, but I have a challenge for you. If you include these in your proposal, identify exactly who will guide or train you. If you don't have guaranteed expert support, these should remain strictly optional exploratory objectives, no exceptions.
Section 5, the research gap check. Let's move beyond the generalities. Now we need to look at the scientific void your research is actually supposed to fill. Quick warning here, simply writing limited studies are available is absolutely not a valid scientific justification for a PhD. Instead, you need a matrix of proof. You systematically map out pathogens, specific resistance genes, and methodologies, like genotype-phenotype correlation, against recent literature to pinpoint the exact localized gap that your project will fill. This matrix is how you definitively prove your research is scientifically valid and strictly necessary.
Finally, Section 6, the best PhD is finished. We've reached the finish line.
This brings our survival guide to its ultimate conclusion: avoid overpromising. We're returning right back to the very first thing people see when they look at your work, the title of your thesis. My advice to you is to actively dial back your ambition. Do not promise high-level computational results or massive sample sizes if you don't have guaranteed backing. Actually, scratch that. Don't just dial it back. Actively prepare 2 to 3 revised, narrow titles that reflect your most feasible path forward. Ensure your title matches what you can actually deliver.
Because at the end of the day, a successful PhD is one that is finished. Let that sink in. This is the absolute truest piece of advice in this entire explainer. A brilliantly ambitious, world-changing project that remains incomplete is ultimately worthless. Your goal is a focused, scientifically valid, and achievable project that actually gets you across the finish line.
So, I'll leave you with this final, provocative question. Does your current working title reflect an achievable reality? I want you to take everything we've covered in this explainer today, go look at your proposal, and ask yourself that question honestly. If the answer isn't a confident yes, well, you're ready to go immediately rewrite and audit your own proposal. Thank you so much for joining me. Get to work on those reality checks, and I will see you in the next explainer.